Welcome back to the deep dive. Our mission here is, well, it's always the same, really. We take a stack of your sources, articles, transcripts, you name it, and we try to pull out the absolute core of what you need to know.
And today, we're tackling something I think a lot of people run into. It's that challenge for advanced learners. You're fluent, but you want mastery.
Exactly. We're aiming for C2, that top tier.
We're focusing squarely on what makes high-level English discourse, dick. If you're at that point where you can handle your job, you can communicate day to day without any problems.
But you still feel like something's missing.
Yes, you feel like you're missing the texture, the precision, the cultural resonance that a highly educated native speaker just uses naturally. If that's you, then this deep dive is definitely for you.
That plateau is so real. I mean, you can get your point across, but maybe your stories don't quite land.
Or a sensitive conversation feels clumsy.
Oh, yeah, clunky. So today we're looking at some specific source dialogues that really showcase what the material calls the art of narrative and delicate negotiation.
And it really is an art. It's about understanding the engine under the hood of C2 communication. It's not just about what words mean, but what they do.
What they do. I like that. So what's this engine running on then?
It runs on precision. And I want to be clear, we're not talking about, just memorizing the most obscure words in the dictionary to show off.
Right.
We're analyzing how specific vocabulary, certain idiomatic expressions, and even grammatical structures are used to carry the emotional and cultural weight of a situation.
So for anyone who might not be totally up on the CEFR framework.
Right, the Common European Framework of Reference for Languages.
Let's give a quick breakdown. B2, that's kind of the goal for a lot of people. You're an independent user.
You can handle complex texts, spontaneous conversation. You're functionally fluent.
And C1 is proficient.
Yeah.
You're using the language flexibly, effectively for work, for academic life.
Exactly. But C2 is the master level. It's where you can understand, virtually everything you hear or read, just with ease.
And not just understand, but synthesize.
That's the key. You can summarize information from all these different sources, spoken and written, and then you can reconstruct arguments, put together accounts in a really coherent way.
And you're doing it fluently, spontaneously, and precisely.
And you're differentiating these finer shades of meaning even when things get really complex. I mean, it's the difference between writing a good report and writing a truly incisive analysis.
Okay, so that's the gap we're trying to bridge today. And we've structured this around two sort of main pillars from the source material.
That's right. First, we're looking at precision in narrative, how to describe things like chaos and chance with real intensity.
And second, negotiation, the language of empathy, how you manage vulnerable moments and, delicate social issues with dignity.
And by digging into these two, we think we can give you some really practical linguistic tools to, start refining your own communication.
Okay, let's do it. Let's start with part one, precision in narrative. This is all about elevating how you describe events, especially events with high energy, a lot of stress, or just surprising luck.
Right. We're moving away from just relaying facts. The week was busy.
Which tells me almost nothing.
Exactly. We want to move into sophisticated narrative storytelling. This is really where C2 speakers, earn their stripes. A B2 speaker gives you information. A C2 speaker transports you into the experience.
So let's talk about why this matters so much. Why does picking one specific word, say frenetic instead of busy, actually change how I, the listener, experience your story?
Well, it's about creating an instant shared understanding. And credibility, too. When you use a word with that level of precision, you're signaling that you don't just translate events. You have the cognitive and emotional vocabulary to categorize them.
Okay.
So if I tell you my week was busy, you get it. I worked a lot. But I tell you it was frenetic.
I'm picturing something completely different. Phones ringing, people running around.
Exactly. You understand. I worked a lot, and I experienced volatility, high stress, and maybe even a feeling of being out of control. It instantly raises the stakes of what I'm telling you.
Okay, let's jump into the specific words the source material pulled out. The first one is that very word, frenetic.
Frenetic. And the definition is so important here. It's fast and energetic activity in a rather wild or uncontrolled way.
That last part, wild or uncontrolled, that feels like the key.
It's everything. That's the nuance that lifts it way beyond just busy or even hectic.
So let's draw that contrast. A tech startup might be moving quickly. We'd call that fast-paced.
Sure. Or high tempo. That could be positive.
So when does it become frenetic?
It crosses the line when the speed starts to undermine the efficiency. When it starts causing, real emotional strain, the speed becomes counterproductive.
I see.
Think about the culture of modern work. A lot of companies say they're fast-paced, but what they actually are is frenetic. They're forcing people into this state of high alert, unstructured urgency.
And the example from the source material nails this. It's a financial setting. The trading floor was absolutely frenetic moments before the market closed.
You can just picture it, can't you? It's not just speed, it's chaos. It's intensity, probably driven by a huge amount of anxiety about that closing bell.
It's a state of emotional and operational disorder.
Precisely. To use it right, you have to be able to spot that specific kind of pressurized, volatile energy. You see it in, retail during the holidays or in a newsroom on a breaking story. It's urgency, but it's tinged with a lack of control.
Okay, so from the energy of chaos, let's talk about the volume of chaos. The next word is inundated.
Ah, yes. Inundated. This is a perfect C2 word because it uses a physical reality, a flood, to describe a psychological or logistical state.
So figuratively, it's being overwhelmed with things or people you have to deal with.
Right. The source material used a great corporate example. After the product launch, the support team was inundated with inquiries.
And again, the specificity there is so powerful. They didn't just get a lot of emails.
No, they got so many that they were metaphorically underwater. They were incapable of handling the sheer volume. The word itself conveys an unmanageable crisis of scale.
It's a much more powerful metaphor, and you can apply it anywhere, really. You could be inundated with applications for a job, inundated with data, or
inundated with bad news, unfortunately. It works for any situation where a person or a system is just completely overwhelmed by the input.
And this brings up a broader point about C2 fluency. It's not just about using the verb.
No, it's about understanding the concept. You can talk about the sheer inundation of data in modern life, using it as a noun nominalization. That's a very common feature of advanced formal discourse.
And it often helps to know the roots of the word, inundated from the Latin inundare, to overflow. When you choose that word, you're tapping into this long history of association with water and, uncontrollable force.
Exactly right. And now let's pivot from all this chaos and exhaustion to something a lot happier. The final word in this set, serendipity.
Serendipity. It's such a beautiful word, but I feel like it's often misused.
It is. The definition has to be strict here. It's the occurrence of events by chance in a happy or beneficial way. A lucky coincidence.
And that's the part people miss. A coincidence is just two things happening at the same time. It's neutral.
Whereas serendipity is never neutral. It must have a positive outcome. The event has to lead to some kind of advantageous discovery or a solution to a problem.
The source example for this was perfect. It was pure serendipity that we met at the airport right before my flight was canceled.
Yeah, so the flight cancellation is a bad thing.
Right, a huge pain.
But the chance meeting immediately transforms that situation. It creates a positive outcome. Maybe the person you met is an old friend, or maybe they can offer you a ride or a place to stay. The benefit is baked right into the word.
What's so interesting about this word from a C2 perspective is the philosophical weight it carries. It's not just luck.
It isn't. Luck can be totally passive. You win the lottery. That's luck.
But serendipity feels different.
It often requires some kind of action or a state of being from the person. You weren't necessarily looking for that specific outcome, but you were perhaps open enough or prepared enough to recognize its benefit when it appeared.
Like a scientist stumbling on a discovery while researching something else entirely.
Exactly. That's classic academic serendipity. The discovery feels like an accident, but it could only have happened to someone with the knowledge to understand what they were looking at.
So to pull these three together, frenetic is for the stressful energy, inundated for the overwhelming volume, and serendipity for the beneficial outcome of chance.
A perfect summary. Now let's see how they all work together in the first dialogue analysis.
Okay, so this scenario is between two characters, David and Sarah, and it starts with something we can all relate to, just being completely overwhelmed at work.
Yes, and David's language right from the start establishes him as an advanced speaker. Sarah says he looks like he's been through the ringer, which is a great idiom itself.
A very natural one.
And David doesn't just say, yeah, I'm tired. He stacks his language to convey maximum stress.
He immediately pulls out frenetic. He says his week has been absolutely frenetic because of the quarterly review.
And he doesn't stop there. He throws in another classic idiom, running from pillar to post since Monday. It's so much more evocative than just saying, I've been running around.
It has a kind of old world charm to it, but it's still perfectly current.
It is. And then he completes this trifecta of stress by saying, I've been absolutely inundated with data analysis. So you have the adjective, frenetic, the idiom running from pillar to post, and this powerful verb, inundated.
It's like a textbook example of how to describe a heavy workload with C2 mastery.
And it completely sets the tone. Sarah knows immediately that he's at his absolute limit. So now the conversation shifts and Sarah starts telling this story, the saga of Jennifer's housing.
And this is where the narrative storytelling really kicks in. She doesn't just jump to the happy ending, she builds the tension.
She does. She says Jennifer was frantic and she was scouring the market for months to no avail.
To no avail. That's another one of those slightly more formal but very precise phrases.
It really underscores the futility of the search. And then she describes the rental market itself as exorbitant.
Not just expensive.
Not just expensive. Exorbitant implies it's unreasonably, almost immorally high. It adds a layer of narrative judgment.
And what's the human cost of all this? Jennifer wasn't just sad or stressed. Sarah says she felt utterly despondent.
That's such a crucial piece of emotional vocabulary. Despondent means a deep loss of hope, of courage. Sarah is painting this complete picture of total emotional exhaustion and defeat.
Which, of course, makes the resolution so much more powerful.
The tension is palpable. Jennifer is defeated. She's at a bistro, on the phone with her mom, just lamenting her situation.
And this is the moment. The fortuitous encounter. A stranger at the next table overhears, interrupts, and apologizes for eavesdropping.
Right, and David's reaction here is so important for our analysis. He says, that's rather forward, but fortune favors the bold, I suppose.
He doesn't just comment on the event. He offers a philosophical reflection on it.
Exactly. He uses this Latin-derived maxim to comment on the nature of taking a risk. And that move from observation to philosophical commentary is a huge marker of advanced discourse.
And then comes the payoff. The stranger says she's relocating overseas for a diplomatic post and needs to assign her lease.
The apartment is available because of this huge life event, not just because a lease is up.
And David immediately spots it. He says, "You're joking. What incredible serendipity." And there's our word, slotted perfectly into the emotional peak of the story.
But Sarah, as a good storyteller, keeps going. She adds the kicker details to really emphasize the good fortune.
She says the apartment is a stone's throw from the office, another fantastic idiom.
Perfect for conveying extreme closeness. And she says it boasts a terrace. She uses the verb boast, which personifies the apartment, gives it a sense of pride in its own features.
But my favorite detail, the most linguistically interesting one, is when she says the previous tenant offered to bequeath some of her furniture.
Yes. Let's pause on bequeath. This is such a sophisticated choice.
Because you don't normally bequeath an old sofa.
You absolutely do not. To bequeath something is to leave it to someone in a will. It's a very formal, very serious word associated with inheritance and death.
So why use it here? It's hyperbole, right?
It's deliberate and very sophisticated hyperbole. On one level, she's just giving away furniture, but by using bequeath, Sarah is signaling the extreme generosity of the act.
It makes it sound like this incredibly valuable, almost sacred gift.
It does. It suggests that the furniture is being treated like a precious inheritance, this final act of transference before the diplomat leaves. It adds this slightly humorous, dramatic flair.
And that shows real mastery. You understand the formal weight of the word, but you're choosing to use it for a specific narrative effect.
That intentional play with different linguistic registers. That is the hallmark of C2. It shows command, flexibility, and real nuance.
So the whole story really hinges on this chance encounter. The serendipity resolved months of frenetic, despondent searching.
And the dialogue ends with them both reflecting on it. David says, 1 minute you're drowning in rejection, and the next, everything falls into place.
And Sarah connects it back to the beginning. Sometimes chaos leads to unexpected opportunities. The whole conversation is just a masterclass in turning an everyday event into a structured, emotionally resonant story.
And the big takeaway here is about structure. C2 narrative means you can manipulate the pace. You use that intense, precise, language frenetic, despondent, exorbitant for the struggle.
And then you use that elevated, slightly dramatic language serendipity bequeathed to maximize the emotional impact of the solution.
Precisely.
That's a really powerful analysis of how to talk about external events. But now we have to shift. We need to look at the internal and, frankly, often much harder part of C2 communication.
Yes. The language of social dynamics and emotional intelligence.
This is where things get tricky.
They do, because perfect grammar won't save you here. When you're dealing with friction or vulnerability or sensitive topics, you need a completely different linguistic toolkit, one designed for empathy and for dignity.
The language of diplomacy, really.
In essence, yes.
Okay, so part 2 is all about negotiation and empathy. And our second scenario dives right in. It's a birthday dilemma that very quickly turns into a negotiation about financial vulnerability.
And this requires a very specific set of words to navigate that kind of honesty without causing offense or, making someone lose face.
This is about how advanced speakers manage to share difficult truths while keeping the social harmony intact.
It is. It requires words that let us talk about being reserved, about noticing subtlety, and about being frank, all with a high degree of precision.
Okay, let's start with the vocabulary. The first word is for that cautious approach. Reticent.
Reticent, meaning not revealing one's thoughts or feelings readily, being reserved or, tight-lipped. The source example is very formal. He was reticent to discuss the details of his resignation publicly.
Well, let's contrast that. If I say someone is shy or just unwilling to speak, that feels different.
It's very different. Shy implies a personality trait, maybe a lack of confidence. Reticent, on the other hand, implies a deliberate, almost strategic choice to be reserved.
So it's a calculated silence.
Exactly. If a junior employee is shy, maybe they just need some encouragement. But if a senior executive is reticent about a merger, it suggests there's classified information or strategic timing involved. The word reticent gives a kind of gravity to the silence.
And as the listener, if you tell me you're reticent about something, I'm going to give you more intellectual respect than if you just said, I don't want to talk about it.
Yes, because you're acknowledging the complexity of your own withholding. It also works as a kind of sophisticated warning, doesn't it? It signals that the subject is delicate and requires a careful approach.
Okay, so from that deliberate reserve, let's look at the flip side. Observing what's being communicated even when someone is holding back. The word is imperceptible.
Imperceptible. So slight, gradual, or subtle that it's hardly noticed. The physical example in the source, an almost imperceptible change in the room's temperature, is a good anchor.
But its real power is in social dynamics.
Oh, enormous power. Advanced speakers use imperceptible to draw attention to these tiny shifts in behavior that might betray what someone is really thinking or feeling, even if they're trying to hide it.
So if a person is being reticent,
their underlying anxiety might show up as an imperceptible shift in their posture or a slight tightening around their eyes. Using the word shows that you, the observer, are paying very close attention to nuance. It confirms your own emotional intelligence.
It's almost a rhetorical tool, isn't it? If you call a change imperceptible, you're basically saying, I noticed something so subtle that most people would have missed it, and I now see how significant it was.
It does give the observer a bit of intellectual credit, yes. And it's also great for describing processes that happen over time. The imperceptible decline of a company's culture or the imperceptible cooling of a friendship. It suggests a gradual change, not a sudden event.
All right, and finally, the word that acts as the counterbalance to all this reserve and subtlety, candor, or candor, with an O in American English.
Yes, candor. The quality of being open and honest in expression. Frankness. But it's so much more formal and carries much more weight than just being honest.
Why is that? Why do we reach for candor in these high-stakes professional or personal settings? The source example was, I appreciated her candor regarding the company's financial risks.
Because in those situations, candor implies honesty that is coupled with courage. Being honest about something easy, well, it's just normal communication.
Right.
But if you display candor about financial risks, or a project's failure, or a personal vulnerability, you're being frank in the face of potentially serious negative consequences.
And you often hear it introduced with a kind of verbal flag, a phrase like, if I can speak with complete candor, or speaking with candor for a moment.
Yes, it's a linguistic tool for mitigating risk. By announcing that you're about to use candor, you prepare the listener. You're signaling a shift in tone, asking them to prepare for an unvarnished truth, which should hopefully get a more mature and measured response.
It professionalizes a difficult conversation.
Beautifully put.
So we have reticent for the strategic silence, imperceptible for the subtle clue, and candor for the courageous truth. These are the pillars of the second dialogue.
And this is the birthday dilemma between Emma and Jake.
It starts with Emma, who is very excited. She wants to celebrate her birthday at this opulent restaurant, Le Bernardin. She calls it a splurge, a big milestone celebration, but Jake is uneasy.
And he signals this immediately and very skillfully. He says he is somewhat reticent regarding the choice of venue.
There it is. He doesn't just say, that sounds expensive. He uses this formal, cautious word to indicate a serious internal reservation.
He's using reticent as a placeholder. He knows he has to bring up the sensitive topic of his finances, and this word buys him a moment and sets a serious tone without being confrontational.
It's linguistic tact.
Absolutely. And then he uses that verbal flag we just talked about. He says, however, may I speak with total candor. This is the moment of truth.
A textbook example. He's managing the shift in the conversation, the formal, almost deferential phrasing, may I speak. It softens the blow of what's coming next.
And what comes next is delivered with very specific, very formal vocabulary. He explains he accepted a salary reduction because of corporate restructuring.
Which is the formal, face-saving way of saying he was about to be made redundant.
Exactly. And now he's exercising strict fiscal discipline. He says spending that amount of money is daunting.
Notice he avoids emotional, blunt language like, I'm broke or I can't afford it. He uses this almost business-like language to create a professional frame around a very personal and vulnerable problem.
And daunting is the perfect word choice. It suggests the expense is intimidating and overwhelming, not just that it's impossible. It's a much more dignified admission.
Emma's response here is just as skilled. She immediately says she was completely oblivious. But then she does something remarkable. She connects his admission to a past observation.
She does. She says she now recalls an almost imperceptible shift in his behavior.
Our second T word.
And she gives a specific example. His declining the last few happy hours. This is the observational payoff. She validates his difficult truth by showing him she was paying attention, even if she didn't understand the reason at the time.
That's such a powerful move in a negotiation like this. It says, I hear you, I accept your candor, and I'm now reevaluating past events through this new information. It actually strengthens their friendship.
It shows real intellectual and emotional engagement. And this brings us to the core problem Jake was facing, which was how to do this while saving face. He admits he didn't want to be a dampener, the person who ruins the fun.
And he talks about the stigma attached to financial struggles. He was focused on maintaining appearances.
That phrase, maintaining appearances, is so important. In many circles, advanced language skills are used not just to communicate, but to uphold a certain image of success, even when you're struggling.
So his C2 skills were actually, at first, being used to hide the truth.
Yes, by being reticent and maintaining those appearances. But the negotiation turns on Emma's ability to pivot without making him feel ashamed. She validates him, saying, friendship transcends these superficialities.
But the real genius is how she proposes the alternative. She doesn't just say, okay, let's do something cheap because you can't afford it.
That would be mortifying for him.
Instead, she finds a way for her to save face, too. She reframes the entire situation. She says she actually had her own reservations about the formality of the place. She calls the fancy restaurant a bit stiff.
This is masterful. She completely shifts the reason for the change. It's no longer about Jake's inability to pay. It's now about her preference for comfort and intimacy.
It allows him to agree to the new plan, a dinner party at her place, without feeling like he's the one who ruined her birthday.
And she even reinforces this by praising the imperceptible but distinct warmth in intimate gatherings. She uses high-level language, our very own vocabulary, to champion the low-cost option over the flaky one.
It's just a stunning example of how advanced language is the ultimate tool for empathy. They solved a problem, they addressed a deep vulnerability, and they actually strengthened their friendship, all through this careful management of language.
And that final reflection in the dialogue really sums it up. Candor strengthens relationships. Silence creates distance. It's a reminder that while being reticent can sometimes be necessary, that prolonged silence born out of fear, it ultimately just damages connection.
And Jake's final line, I was too focused on maintaining appearances rather than trusting our friendship, shows how far he came in that one conversation.
Absolutely. True C2 fluency, when it's used honestly, is about building trust, not just showing off your vocabulary.
Okay, this has been an incredibly detailed exploration. We've gone from the frenetic chaos of the outside world all the way to the delicate negotiations of our internal lives.
I think we can now synthesize all of this into two really actionable strategies for you, for the listener, to start using.
All right, let's wrap this up with the key takeaways. First, When it comes to narrative, you have to challenge yourself. You have to get rid of those generic B2 level descriptors. If your communication feels like it's hit a wall, it's probably because you're still saying things are busy or lucky or expensive.
Instead, you need to reach for that specialized vocabulary. Use frenetic to describe that pressurized, out-of-control chaos. Use inundated when you're talking about an overwhelming volume. And use serendipity only when a chance event leads to a really beneficial, almost magical result.
These choices give your stories texture, they give them drama, and they give them intellectual weight.
Then second, for negotiation and social dynamics. You have to equip yourself with a language that lets you manage emotional friction with dignity and grace.
So, using that emotional intelligence vocabulary we talked about, reticent, candor, imperceptible.
And remember the framing strategy we saw with Emma. Advanced language isn't just for stating a problem, it's for solving it collaboratively. She used sophisticated phrasing to shift the focus away from Jake's financial issue and onto her own preference for intimacy.
That allowed him to save face and, the relationship actually grew stronger. So advanced language becomes a tool for empathy.
And for sophisticated problem solving.
Reaching C2 proficiency really is, as the source material puts it, a marathon of continuous refinement. It's not about passing a test once. It's about making these precise linguistic tools feel like second nature.
So start today. Start observing. Look for those imperceptible shifts in body language around you. And the next time you have to share a difficult truth, think about how you might speak with total candor. Try to integrate these specific words into your own discussions.
And that brings us to the final thought we want to leave you with. It builds on what we saw with Jake and Emma. If sophisticated speakers are so good at negotiating delicate situations by finding ways for everyone to save face, what opportunities for genuine, raw, courageous candor are we missing when we are only focused on maintaining those superficial appearances?
It's a real trade-off, isn't it? We often choose comfort over connection, but Jake learned that the deepest connections sometimes require the greatest linguistic honesty. So where in your own life can you afford to be a little more candid, even if the thought of it feels daunting?
Something to think about. Until next time, keep refining your craft.
And keep diving deep. We'll talk to you soon. Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, we are taking a pretty significant pivot.
We are.
We're moving past the language of, daily function, and we're really entering the territory of high-stakes influence. We were talking C2, the mastery level. And this deep dive is squarely focused on the professional sphere, which is, I think, precisely where advanced English is tested most rigorously.
Oh, absolutely. Not just for fluency, but for impact.
For impact, exactly.
And that's the core mission today. For advanced learners, the whole metric of success changes. It just completely shifts.
How so?
Well, it's no longer about, can I be understood?
Right, that's a given.
That's the baseline. It's now about, can I wield nuance? Can I persuade? We are going beyond simply defining words. We're analyzing vocabulary as a tactical instrument.
A tool for negotiation, for diplomacy.
And for navigating those really complex power dynamics you find in any workplace. It's not just about what you say, but, and this is the key, how you position your stance to manage outcomes and relationships.
Okay, let's unpack that right there. That core concept, the pivot from, let's say, functionality to finesse.
Yes.
Our sources made this incredibly clear distinction between, say, an intermediate B2 speaker and an advanced C2 speaker in a professional setting, especially when things get tense.
Yes, when there's friction. Think about a very common but high-stakes scenario. You have to express outright disagreement in a meeting with your boss or senior leadership.
Okay.
A B2 speaker who is, operating comfortably but without that fine-tuning of truly advanced language, they're going to prioritize clarity. They'll prioritize efficiency.
So they might just say it.
They might just state it plainly, I don't agree with that timeline.
Which is clear.
It's perfectly clear. But depending on the context, on the culture of the company, on the ego of the person you're talking to, it can feel abrupt. Oppositional, maybe even adversarial. You've created a direct conflict, me versus you.
And the C2 speaker then achieves the exact same objective, which is, we are not doing this, but they wrap it in a layer of what you might call professional insulation.
That is a perfect way to put it. They're managing the ego of the person across the table.
So what would they say?
They might rephrase the objection entirely. Instead of, I don't agree, they'll say something like, I have some reservations regarding the feasibility of that approach, given the current resource constraints.
Okay, let's break that down. What's actually been achieved there?
A few things. First, they've established absolute firmness in their position. Make no mistake, they are not moving on that timeline.
Right. The no is still there.
It's embedded in professional language. But second, and just as important, they've softened the blow significantly. They introduced complexity.
They shifted the focus.
Exactly. The focus is no longer on the quality of the idea or a personal disagreement with the other person.
Right. It's not your idea is bad.
It's the feasibility of the approach is questionable. It becomes an objective, logistical problem that they both have to solve rather than a subjective, personal fight.
So the core insight here, and I think this is what we really have to spend time on, is that advanced language lets a speaker stay absolutely firm in their position.
Totally unmoving.
They are not backing down, but they're simultaneously using this finesse, this diplomacy to mitigate the immediate, adversarial reaction.
Yes.
That's the C2 advantage. It's like linguistic self-preservation combined with strategic assertiveness.
And that strategic assertiveness goes beyond just disagreement. I mean, consider another example. A B2 request for a project delay might sound like, can we delay the launch until Q1?
Okay, it's clear, but maybe a little weak. It almost sounds like you're asking for permission, suggesting a lack of planning on your part.
Precisely. It puts you in a subordinate position. Now, a C2 speaker makes the exact same request but elevates it. They might say, given the current resource strain and the pending regulatory review, I suggest we table the discussion regarding the final launch until Q1.
Okay.
And then they add the justification to ensure adequate resource allocation and a comprehensive risk assessment.
Wow. Okay, so the outcome is identical. A delay.
Identical.
But the justification is now framed as a necessary measure. It's due diligence. It's strategic foresight. It makes them sound like a leader, not a follower who failed to plan.
It is the difference between asking for permission and proposing a superior strategy.
That's it.
You manage the relationship while achieving your objective. And in high-pressure environments, that relational management is what unlocks professional advancement. It really is.
Because when the stakes are high.
When the stakes are high, ambiguity or bluntness, it costs money, it costs time, and it can destroy relationships. Precision is power.
Let's dive into our first section then. Let's focus squarely on the language you need when conflict is inevitable. These are words built for high-stakes communication, for managing conflict, and for navigating that tricky business of compromise. All right, so our first vocabulary set is steeped in diplomacy. These are the verbal shields and scalpels you need when you have to push back or manage risk or even concede ground strategically.
And the first word we absolutely have to cover is mitigate.
Okay.
This is the undisputed staple of corporate vocabulary. It's in management discussions, it's in boardrooms, it's global. If you want to sound C2 in a business context, you have to use this word and, importantly, use it correctly.
Let's talk about that usage, because a lot of people might just use reduce or lessen. So what is the subtle professional difference that makes mitigate superior? Especially if you're writing, say, a high-stakes memo.
That's an excellent point. That subtle difference is everything. To mitigate means specifically to make something less severe, harmful, or painful. So while reduce can just mean making something smaller.
Like reducing the size of a budget.
Exactly. Mitigate almost exclusively refers to negative outcomes or risks. And crucially, mitigation implies a proactive strategy. It's a plan designed to lessen the impact of a known existing threat.
So if I say we need to reduce costs, that's, let's say, B2, it's functional. But if I say we need to mitigate the financial risk associated with the market downturn, that frames the exact same action-cutting costs as a necessary strategic defense against an external threat.
Precisely. You sound like a strategist. The utility is immense because it focuses the discussion away from the error or the problem itself and toward the sophisticated, calculated solution. You're not just, cleaning up a mess.
You're managing risk.
You are actively managing the fallout from an operational failure, a PR scandal, or even geopolitical uncertainty. It's the language of sophisticated risk management.
Okay, that makes perfect sense. Next up, we have contentious. This feels like a very powerful yet diplomatic way to describe a difficult issue.
It is. It describes an issue or a topic that is highly likely to cause an argument, strong disagreement, or controversy.
And the application is tactical.
Purely tactical. Imagine you're in a team meeting and someone proposes an idea that you think is just, toxic.
Right. A terrible idea.
Saying that is a bad idea attacks the person and makes them defensive. But by labeling the proposal or the issue itself as highly contentious, you shift the scrutiny away from the person who suggested it.
And onto the inherent difficulties within the topic itself.
You've depersonalized it.
That distinction depersonalization has to be crucial for managing relationships in a hierarchy. By labeling an issue contentious, you're signaling that there's going to be serious difficulty and likely opposition from other stakeholders.
Right. Not just from you.
It's not just my opinion, it's an objective reality of the situation.
It acts as an early warning signal. For instance, if the annual budget allocation for R&D versus marketing is always a heated debate,
as it often is.
You don't say it's a difficult issue, you say it's a highly contentious issue among the department heads. It elevates the problem. It goes from a simple disagreement to a conflict that is, recognized institutionally. The C2 speaker uses this to show they understand the political landscape and that sensitivity is required.
But I do need to challenge this slightly. Isn't calling something contentious just a polite way of saying it's a bad idea? Doesn't it still kind of attack the person, just more indirectly?
That is a fair challenge. It's a really important distinction. The difference lies in the proof.
Okay.
If I say, your idea is bad, I immediately bear the burden of proving why I think that. It's my opinion against yours.
Right, it's subjective.
But if I say, that strategy is contentious, I'm making a different claim. I'm saying that I know it will generate widespread internal or external opposition based on existing knowledge or historical precedent.
So you're externalizing the resistance.
Exactly. It's an assertion about the marketability of the idea, not its intrinsic quality. And that is the key difference. It's about data, not just opinion.
That changes the entire strategic calculation.
Okay.
And finally, in this set, a word that describes a kind of strategic submission, acquiesce.
Yes, this is a very sophisticated verb. It means to accept something reluctantly, but without protest. It implies compliance, but under pressure.
So it's not really agreeing.
Not at all. It's a word that perfectly captures that sense of surrender without agreement.
The implication here is fascinating because it clarifies the psychological state of the person making the concession. It's not a compromise based on a shared understanding. It's resignation.
Right. You're agreeing despite having significant internal objections.
And in a professional context, why is that so critical to identify?
Because recognizing when you or your management acquiesces tells you a lot about the long-term viability of that decision.
How so?
Well, if the CEO acquiesced to the board's demands for a merger, even though they had initial objections, the CEO isn't fully committed.
So that internal reservation, that reluctance.
It might manifest later. It could show up as operational drag, a lack of enthusiasm, or even passive resistance to the plan's execution. It signals future problems.
This is a crucial question. Does acquiescing remove personal liability? If I'm forced to acquiesce to a flawed project timeline and then the project fails, can I point back and say, well, I accepted this reluctantly, or am I still on the hook for the execution?
That is the million-dollar question. Operationally, you are usually still responsible. You have to execute the plan.
Of course.
But legally, and more importantly, politically, the term is vital. If you document your reservations internally before you acquiesce.
The paper trail.
The paper trail. That documentation shifts the political and strategic risk away from your personal judgment and onto the person who imposed the decision. The C2 speaker understands the critical value of documenting their reluctance before they submit.
So knowing these words isn't just about using them yourself. It's about recognizing when others are using them to describe a situation you're in.
Absolutely.
Are you and your team truly compromising, or are you just being forced to acquiesce? That's a huge difference. Now, let's put these three words, mitigate, contentious, and acquiesce, into action. We have a detailed, high-pressure scenario from our source material, the deadline dispute concerning the Alpha project.
This is a classic.
We have two key players, Marcus and Elena, and they are dealing with an incredibly impatient, high-value client who is pushing hard for a Monday release, even though the product is still deep in beta.
It's a total pressure cooker, and you can see the different levels of strategic thinking immediately. Marcus is focused on contract retention. He is, frankly, panicking.
He's showing that B2 level thinking. It's driven by fear.
Right. His goal is to avoid the immediate pain. Elena, on the other hand, is focused on the long term. Product integrity, brand reputation, future risk.
So the stakes are immediate. Elena sees the Monday launch as, and these are the words she uses, untenable and reckless. She knows there are still critical bugs. Marcus, however, is inclined to simply acquiesce to the client's timeline. He just wants to avoid losing the contract, and he says something like, look, we can just fix the major bugs with a patch on Tuesday.
He's rationalizing surrender. It's a classic short-term fix. He is prioritizing the immediate relationship over the integrity of the product, and in doing so, he's setting the company up for massive reputational damage down the line.
So Elena has a choice. She needs to counter this mindset, but she can't sound hysterical. She can't sound disloyal to Marcus, who is her project lead. This is a very delicate situation.
It's managing up. And this is where her tactical use of language begins. She can't just walk in and say no. She has to enter the conversation with structured logic. She has to avoid the blunt, I disagree, or that's a reckless idea.
So let's try to reconstruct this. Her internal strategy must be, what, step one? Acknowledge the pressure he's under, but immediately elevate her objection from a personal preference to a systemic risk.
Yes, that's it.
So Marcus starts the conversation. He says, look, we have to deliver on Monday. The client is threatening to pull the contract. I'm just going to have to acquiesce to their timeline and we'll manage the fallout.
Okay, so Elena's counter has to be swift, but also very specific. She can't attack his decision to acquiesce directly. That would be challenging his authority.
So she attacks the strategy of launching prematurely.
Exactly. She might say something like, Marcus, I understand the client pressure, and I know you're in a tough spot, but launching a defective product is a highly contentious strategy right now.
Right there. She uses the word.
She uses the word. And notice the layering. By calling it contentious, she frames the decision as one that will spark internal controversy and conflict.
And she has to back it up.
Immediately, she would continue, our engineering team estimates a 30% system failure rate in the first 24 hours. That's not a risk, it's a certainty.
So she's aligned herself with the objective resistance of the engineering team. She's added external weight to her objection. It's not just her.
She's turned her personal resistance into a technical report. The strategy itself is now inherently problematic, not just something she personally dislikes.
Okay, but that's just identifying the problem. A C2 speaker then has to offer the superior alternative. They have to be solution-oriented.
Yes. She has to pivot directly from risk identification to risk management. And this is where she brings in our first word, mitigation.
Her core argument reframes the entire discussion. It's not about delaying anymore, is it? It's about protecting the client relationship in a smarter way.
That's the pivot. She might say, instead of submitting and just hoping for the best, we need a strategic counterproposal, one designed to mitigate the client's frustration while protecting our brand reputation.
That word, mitigate, it immediately shifts the psychological burden, doesn't it? She's no longer talking about delaying the delivery.
No, she's talking about implementing a quality assurance measure. She is brilliantly presenting the delay as a superior form of customer service.
And what's so fascinating is that the word mitigate automatically suggests a spectrum of calculated risks. It opens the door for her to introduce a more complex solution.
Which is exactly what she does, the phased rollout. She proposes it specifically to mitigate the client's public expectations.
So what does that look like?
It means they release a limited, stable version to a small, controlled group by Monday.
So the client gets something on Monday. It satisfies the immediate demand.
It does. While delaying the full public launch for another week, it's a pragmatic compromise. It shows they're listening, but also that they're in control.
And then she secures his agreement by linking her C2 vocabulary directly to the bottom line. The financials. This is the checkmate.
This is the checkmate. She'd say, Marcus, if the system crashes on day one, mitigating that high visibility disaster will require a week of emergency work. It will cost 10 times more than a 1-week extension, and it will permanently damage our reputation with this client and others.
Wow.
Then the final line. A planned 1-week extension that allows us to fully mitigate these known risks is the only financially responsible choice.
She has completely neutralized the argument for acquiescing. She's made it clear that while Marcus felt forced to submit to the client's demand,
the financial reality made that submission far more costly, far more dangerous than an assertive, planned negotiation.
And what does Marcus do?
He agrees, almost instantly. He sees her argument is undeniably compelling and strategically superior. He says he'll back her up and present her phased plan to the client.
So let's analyze that managing up technique. Elena used contentious and untenable to attack the idea, never Marcus himself.
Never.
And by identifying that Marcus was feeling forced to acquiesce, she didn't just offer resistance, she offered him a better way out, a less costly, more strategic way out.
The lesson is just undeniable. Advanced vocabulary gives you the tools not just to argue, but to successfully reposition yourself as the strategic voice of reason. You can transform a simple disagreement into a strategic proposal for risk mitigation.
Fantastic.
No.
Okay, that whole segment covered managing external conflict. Now, I want to make that crucial transition from external diplomacy with clients and peers to managing internal conflict, the profound dilemmas we all face in our own careers.
Exactly. We're shifting now to words that help us navigate our own internal conflict, our decision-making, and assessing our career trajectory.
This is so important.
It is. These words are essential because they help us articulate complex emotional and practical tensions accurately. And that articulation is the very first step toward creating an effective strategy.
So these aren't just words for communicating with others. They're tools for self-clarity. They help us structure our own thoughts when the choices in front of us feel, well, paralyzing. Let's start with a beautiful word for a very complex feeling. Ambivalence.
Ambivalence. It's the state of having mixed feelings or contradictory ideas about something, and it's really crucial to distinguish this from simple indecision or confusion.
Okay, what is that distinction?
Indecision often means you just lack sufficient data. You don't know the right answer. Ambivalence means you have strong contradictory feelings or values attached to both options.
So it's an emotional tension.
It's a powerful emotional tension.
Right.
It's what makes the decision feel paralyzing. You are being pulled forcefully into equally attractive or maybe equally negative directions.
It really acknowledges the true internal struggle, the feeling of being torn. For example, you might feel deep ambivalence about accepting a promotion because while the new title is prestigious and the money is great, it requires moving your family across the country. Both forces, career advancement, and family stability are powerful, positive values, and they're creating this incredible tension.
And the C2 speaker uses this word to show a depth of thought. They're not just unsure, they are experiencing a genuine high-level conflict of their core values or priorities. It elevates the conversation beyond simple logistics and into the realm of personal commitment.
Okay. Our next word is a classic business anchor, but it's often, I think, misused as a synonym for being cynical. And that's pragmatic.
Yes. To be pragmatic is to deal with things sensibly and realistically. It's based on practical rather than theoretical or, idealized considerations.
In a professional context, then, what is its function?
It's the deliberate language of separating emotion and idealism from business necessity. It demands that you base your actions on observable reality and practical constraints, regardless of how you wish things were.
It grounds the discussion in what's real. For instance, you might have this idealistic vision for a new project, but the pragmatic reality is the budget simply doesn't allow for it.
Exactly. The C2 user employs the word pragmatic to justify cutting the sentimental elements of a plan and focusing on the essential functional core.
And that reframes the concept. Being pragmatic isn't about being cynical or heartless. It's about being responsible.
That's the key. It allows you to focus on what can be done or what must be done, regardless of your emotional attachment. It acts as a necessary framework for sound, objective decision-making, especially in resource-constrained environments.
And the final word in this set, one that conveys a really deep sense of awareness, cognizant.
Cognizant. It means having knowledge or being aware of something. However, its application is where that C2 distinction truly shines.
How so? It sounds a bit like just knowing.
It implies a deeper, more profound, and often more cautionary level of awareness than just knowing. It sounds authoritative. It adds a layer of seriousness and weight to any advice you're giving.
It demands respect and attention from the listener. The example from our sources was so potent, needing to be fully cognizant of the legal ramifications before signing a contract.
Right. It emphasizes the required level of deep, proactive awareness, not just a surface-level glance. You must not only know the rules exist, you must be deeply aware of the consequences of breaking them.
So it's about understanding the second and third order effects of a decision.
Perfectly put. If you are advising a new manager, you don't just tell them, hey, be aware of team morale.
Right.
You tell them you need to be fully cognizant of the team's current morale deficit. That framing implies that if they fail to address it, the consequences will be severe and predictable. It adds gravity to the reality that you're presenting.
Now let's introduce our next case study, James and Sophie. Sophie is a recognized top performer who has just received a substantial aggressive offer from a competitor. And she's going to her longtime mentor, James, for advice. This is really the archetype of an internal career conflict.
And Sophie's dilemma is immediate, and it's emotionally complex. She is caught between her current emotional connection to her job and this significant leap in professional prestige and, of course, finance.
And she comes to James, and she actually uses the word. She explicitly states the feeling she's grappling with. She is paralyzed by ambivalence.
And that phrase is so powerful, paralyzed by ambivalence.
Let's detail that internal pull she's feeling. On one side, she loves her current company culture. She says the team feels like family, she has strong relationships, the work environment is comfortable.
It's emotional security.
Exactly. But on the other side, the new role offers a prestigious VP title and a 40% salary increase. It's a massive jump.
This is the classic tangible conflict James identifies for her. He calls it the heart versus the wallet.
And that really highlights the tension inherent in ambivalence. It's the strong, contradictory pull of two positive factors. One side offers emotional fulfillment, the other offers undeniable financial and professional growth.
And if she were simply confused, James could just give her data, like a spreadsheet. But because she is ambivalent, the conflict is about her values. It's much deeper.
So James has to step in as the voice of reason. He knows he has to guide her toward a rational decision, but he also has to respect the emotional complexity. And to do this, he relies heavily on the concept of being pragmatic.
His counsel is very sophisticated. He starts by acknowledging that loyalty is a virtue, but then he immediately shifts the focus. He says Sophie must prioritize her own growth and her long-term responsibility to herself.
And he reframes the definition of the word.
Yes, he does. He says, Sophie, being pragmatic means being responsible, not being cynical. It means looking at the data points that will secure your future.
That reframing is so powerful. It gives her permission to separate sentiment from finance. He's saying it's okay to make a decision based on the numbers.
And he points out that applying pragmatic thinking is essential here. He says she must be pragmatic about her financial future, especially with the rising cost of living, acknowledging that the competitor's offer addresses a practical financial reality that her current company has, up to this point, ignored.
And then James introduces the danger of inaction. And to do that, he brings in our third word, the need for cognizance.
This is a critical move. He warns her that if she stays solely out of comfort, sacrificing that financial growth,
she must be cognizant of the fact that she might grow deeply resentful later on.
Exactly. Resentful of the company for not valuing her enough, and maybe even resentful of herself for prioritizing comfort over her potential.
That warning that staying out of comfort could lead to future resentment is a terrifyingly powerful insight.
It is.
And using the word cognizant gives that warning immense gravity. It tells Sophie she needs to be deeply aware of the potential long-term psychological and emotional cost of her choice.
He's framing her decision not just as a choice between two jobs, but as a choice about her future emotional state.
So this moves them into the strategy phase. James knows she's valuable and that her genuine ambivalence is actually her biggest piece of leverage.
Absolutely. He advises her not to worry about holding the company for ransom, which is a common fear.
Right. I don't want to seem greedy.
Exactly. He tells her, approach HR professionally. Express your genuine ambivalence. Tell them you love the team, but that the financial disparity is the deciding factor.
Why is that so effective?
Because it shows she's being mature and transparent. And crucially, he says it demonstrates that you are cognizant of your market value and that you're acting with professional responsibility to yourself.
So by using this C2 vocabulary, she turns what could be an emotional or aggressive request, a demand for a counteroffer, into a clear, professional statement of fact.
She's just acknowledging reality. She's being cognizant of the facts. And she's expressing the conflict of her feelings, her ambivalence.
The company can't really argue with her financial necessity, which she's framed as a pragmatic reality, not just a whim.
And James's final instruction to her summarizes the function of this vocabulary perfectly. He tells her, analyze the data, remove the sentiment, and make the pragmatic choice.
This just demonstrates so clearly how C2 language structures your thought process and how that leads to a clear professional strategy. Hashtag 2.3, analysis of language and clarity.
You know, we really should dedicate a significant segment here to analyzing why these 6 terms function as C2 level tools, not just in isolation, but how they synthesize into a superior communication strategy.
Let's do that. Let's start with the power of combining abstract nouns with strong verbs, like we saw in the phrase paralyzed by ambivalence.
Yes. Advanced speakers don't just use big words, they create vivid conceptual imagery. And that phrase is key. It conveys Sophie's state instantly and dramatically.
It's so much more effective than just saying, I feel confused and unable to decide.
Oh, miles more effective. It elevates the dialogue from a simple description, I can't decide, to a profound psychological analysis. My commitment to two conflicting values has brought my decision-making process to a complete halt.
It also demonstrates a high level of self-awareness. When you can name the precise tension you're feeling, you're already halfway to solving it.
You are. Then there's the functional power of the word pragmatic. As we saw with James, the word acts as a comprehensive framework for objective decision-making. It isn't just an adjective, it's an instruction.
What do you mean by that, an instruction?
When you decide to be pragmatic, you are committing to a specific process. You will analyze the objective data, you will remove the sentimental variables, and you will choose the most viable path forward given the reality of the situation.
It sets a rigorous standard for how the decision has to be approached. It forces both the speaker and the listener to move past what they wish was true.
And to focus on what is true.
And let's look at how the conflict terms we discussed earlier interact. The relationship between contentious and mitigate.
It's symbiotic. It's a perfect pairing. You use contentious to identify the politically difficult reality that must be addressed, and then you use mitigate to propose the strategic action that neutralizes that difficulty.
One identifies the threat structure.
And the other provides the defense mechanism. They operate as a pair in high-stakes strategy documents and conversations all the time.
That pairing ensures you're not just, complaining about a problem. You're always proposing a solution.
Always.
Yeah.
And finally, let's revisit the authority of cognizant. When James tells Sophie, you must be cognizant of the fact, rather than just, you need to know.
He's emphasizing a non-negotiable level of internalized awareness.
Yes. He's telling the listener that this piece of knowledge is absolutely critical and that failure to internalize it will lead to predictable negative consequences.
Like the predicted internal resentment he warned her about.
Precisely. It forces the listener to acknowledge the weight of the reality being presented. So these words, they aren't just synonyms for simpler words. They are diplomatic leverage, they are emotional clarifiers, and they are strategic planning tools.
They allow you to define the terms of the discussion, whether you're managing conflict with a demanding client or
managing your own complex career trajectory. They transform communication from a simple transfer of information into an act of strategic positioning. #, conclusion, and final takeaways.
This deep dive has, I think, really shown us that C2 level professional communication is a toolkit for influence.
It is.
And the tools we've explored today move us beyond simple transactions into nuanced diplomacy and clear internal strategy.
Let's synthesize the applications of all 6 words one final time, just to see how they work together to create a seamless C2 strategy.
Okay, so if a client or your boss presents a dangerous strategy, you first label it as contentious to challenge the idea without attacking the person.
Then you immediately offer a strategic counterproposal that is designed to mitigate the known operational and reputational risks.
And in doing so, you avoid the necessity to simply acquiesce out of short-term fear or panic.
Exactly.
Then, when you're faced with a major career decision, you can gain self-clarity by first naming your emotional state accurately. Perhaps you identify that you're struggling with ambivalence.
That painful pull of two good contradictory forces.
And you counter that emotional tension by committing to making a pragmatic choice, a responsible choice based on realistic constraints.
While ensuring all along that you are fully cognizant of the practical, financial, and psychological ramifications of either staying or leaving.
The power of this language is just undeniable. It gives you surgical precision in a conflict and unparalleled clarity in self-assessment.
And it means you are communicating at the same strategic level as the people who are making the highest level decisions in your industry.
We spent this time focusing on how these words manage external relationships with clients, management, mentors. But I think you'd agree the most profound application is often internal, for self-clarity.
Without a doubt.
So here is the final provocative thought for you, the listener. We want you to use this knowledge for introspection right now. What important professional or even personal decision are you currently facing?
It could be a job change. It could be a conflict on your team. Maybe it's planning for a major life shift.
I want you to take one of the words we discussed today. Let's say ambivalence. Apply it to your current biggest struggle. If you are struggling, is it because you are experiencing ambivalence?
And if so, what are the two conflicting, equally strong forces that are paralyzing your choice? Just by using that one word, you structure the problem, and suddenly that internal tension is made clear.
Or consider the word pragmatic. What is the most sentimental aspect of your professional life that you need to be responsible enough to set aside? By committing to a truly pragmatic approach, what hidden reality are you now able to face that might allow you to make a more responsible decision for your future?
Remember, the vocabulary itself is not the solution. It is the flashlight that illuminates the precise, subtle structure of the problem you are facing. Use these words to analyze your own situation, and you will find the path forward is much, much clearer.
Until next time, stay curious, and above all, stay strategically eloquent. Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're going to forget about, checking off your to-do list or figuring out airport logistics. We are climbing to what our source material defines as the intellectual summit. This is about advanced knowledge, advanced communication.
Yeah.
This isn't basic fluency. We are talking about fluency at the level of generating and debating really complex ideas.
That's absolutely right. We're stepping into what you could call the final frontier for language users, intellectual discourse.
Right.
And when you're operating at this level, you aren't just describing what happened in the past.
No.
You're analyzing what is inherently true. You're projecting what must happen, or you're articulating the complex structure of what it all even means.
And to do that, you need more than just a good vocabulary. You need a highly precise lexicon.
Exactly.
And that is exactly our mission for you, the learner.
Yeah.
We have synthesized these high-level conversations, these documents, to extract the specific vocabulary you need. For when that discussion shifts from, say, the concrete world of objects and actions to the conceptual world of ideas, of patterns, of these complex internal states.
It's a huge leap.
It is. So if you're preparing for a big strategy meeting, writing a significant paper, or, maybe just wanting to articulate a deep personal truth, this is the language you're going to need.
Yeah. And the ability to handle abstract thought with that kind of precision, that's the hallmark of truly proficient communicators.
Okay.
So we've organized our findings into two critical but ultimately interconnected domains. First, we're going to examine the strategic and intellectual concepts.
So the language of business, innovation.
The language of large-scale social critique, that kind of thing.
And then in the second half, we pivot.
We pivot inward. To the reflective and emotional concepts, we're talking about the sophisticated language of self-awareness, of creativity, of profound personal insight.
The goal then is clarity and exactitude in every environment.
Precision, that's the name of the game.
Okay, let's unpack this first part. We're starting with the external world.
Right.
The marketplace, the lab, these huge global shifts. These are the words you need when you're analyzing, say, a society-wide change, or you're in one of those high-stakes strategy sessions.
Where, millions can depend on the accuracy of your assessment.
Exactly.
So our first concept, and I would argue it's the most foundational when you're discussing significant structural change, is the word paradigm.
Paradigm. I love that word because it immediately signals that the speaker isn't talking about some minor adjustment. Where does it get that weight?
Well, the weight, it really comes from its Greek root, paradigma.
Okay.
It means pattern or example. So formally, a paradigm is defined as a typical example or pattern, a structural model.
Model.
But its rhetorical function, that is where the power lies. By invoking a paradigm, you are arguing that the core set of assumptions governing a field.
The rules of the game.
Exactly. The very rules of the game have been established.
So it's more than just a framework. A framework feels like something you can easily switch out.
You can. A framework is a tool.
But a paradigm, that's the entire theoretical landscape that the framework rests on.
Precisely. Look, if you're talking about a new marketing strategy, that's a framework change. It's tactical.
Right.
But if you are talking about a new communication paradigm, well, now you're arguing that the way humans fundamentally interact with information has changed. Forever.
Like the shift from print media to digital.
That's the perfect example. It wasn't just a change in how we advertise. That was a paradigm shift in how we consume, share, and even validate information itself.
Right. So the key insight from the sources, and this is something you really have to internalize, is that the real power is in that phrase, paradigm shift. When you use that, you are stating that a fundamental change in the underlying assumptions has occurred.
It's a point of no return.
Yes.
Yeah.
The example we extracted makes this so clear. The invention of the internet created a new paradigm for global communication.
Yeah.
Couldn't go back even if you wanted to.
And that contrast is vital. If a speaker uses the term paradigm, they are forcing you, the listener, to think structurally.
Right.
They're saying, look, We have to evaluate this issue through a whole new set of rules.
Right, because if you just say it's a new trend,
It sounds temporary, it sounds reversible, maybe even faddish.
but a new paradigm,
Yeah,
that's a declaration. You're saying the core rules of reality for that domain have been permanently rewritten.
you've got it. It's a powerful, powerful concept to deploy.
Moving on, the sources gave us a word for total saturation. And it's a much more precise and, frankly, impressive adjective than just saying it's all over the place.
Eccles, yes.
Let's dive into ubiquitous.
Ubiquitous is a fantastic choice. It derives from the Latin ubique,
Ubique.
which means everywhere. So it means present, appearing, or found everywhere. But its sophistication really, it lies in the implication of normalization.
Normalization. Say more about that.
Well, it's not just widespread. Widespread suggests high volume, but there could still be pockets of scarcity.
Right. Like fast food is widespread, but you might not find it in a remote village.
Exactly. Ubiquitous implies total saturation and, crucially, a general lack of surprise at its presence. It's just become part of the background reality.
Got it. So think about the example from the source. Smartphones have become ubiquitous in modern society, altering how we interact socially.
Right. If you say smartphones are common, you sound like, well, like you just arrived from the past.
Yeah.
But if you say they are ubiquitous, you're conveying the depth of that penetration, the total societal saturation, and the fact that their existence is now an assumed condition.
An assumed condition for social interaction, for commerce, for work. It's a very specific, powerful word for describing that broad, deep societal impact.
It is.
But here's a question. Doesn't calling something ubiquitous just state the obvious sometimes? How does using that word actually advance a strategic conversation?
That's a crucial question. And the answer is that the power of ubiquitous in a strategic context isn't just descriptive, it's foundational.
Foundation.
By establishing that a technology or a condition is ubiquitous, you remove the possibility of arguing against its existence.
I see.
You force the debate to pivot immediately to consequence. You are basically saying, stop debating if it's here. Let's start debating what we do now that it is everywhere.
So you're setting the factual baseline for the real negotiation.
That's it. It's a word used to terminate a lower-level, pointless discussion and move everyone to a higher-level strategy session.
That completely reframes it for me. It's a tool.
Absolutely. And that leads us directly to our third strategic word,
Okay.
which is the constant fear for anyone operating within a fast-moving competitive paradigm. And that word is obsolescence.
Oof. Yeah. That word embodies the existential race against time.
It does.
Obsolescence. It refers to the process of becoming obsolete. Outdated, unnecessary, no longer used. It's just so cold and clinical, isn't it?
It is, and the distinction between being, say, outdated and facing obsolescence is important.
How so?
Outdated suggests you're just behind the times, you can catch up. Obsolescence suggests that the market, the technology, or the governing paradigm has permanently moved on, and there is no coming back. It's a final indictment of your relevance.
Wow. The sources tie this directly to the context of rapid innovation, especially in tech. It's the ultimate threat. And the example is chillingly direct. In the fast-paced tech world, companies must innovate constantly to avoid obsolescence.
It connects directly to this idea of planned disruption. If you're a company, you aren't just trying to make more money this quarter.
No.
You are running a survival clock against your competitors who are, right now, trying to make your entire product line redundant.
So when you deploy the word obsolescence in a meeting,
You're communicating a sense of structural inevitability. It's tied to the march of progress itself, not just a failure of your marketing department.
it's so interesting to think about the cultural difference there. Avoiding obsolescence is survival, of course. But in certain disruptive circles, the key to longevity is embracing the obsolescence of your own current model.
Yes. You have to be willing to destroy your current paradigm before someone else does it for you.
And that tension right there is where high-level strategy lives.
It's the whole ball game. Now, let's see these three words. Paradigm, ubiquitous, and obsolescence, deployed in a setting that demands immediate high-stakes decision-making.
Okay, so we're now jumping into a detailed conversation. This is between Julian and Alistair, two senior executives.
Right.
And they're debating the aggressive integration of artificial intelligence into their condition, what's described as a historically human-centric financial services firm.
So this is a clash of cultures, not just strategies.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And remember, this isn't theory for them. This is about immediate restructuring and, frankly, survival.
This case study is a masterclass in rhetorical application. You have Julian, who has to convince Alistair, the cautious brand steward, that doing nothing is suicide.
Right. And Alistair has to somehow concede the technological reality without sacrificing the core value of their brand. It's a tightrope walk.
A very thin one.
So Julian kicks off with just extreme force. He frames AI not as an option, but as an inevitability.
He even calls it a panacea, a solution for all their productivity issues, which is, a bit of an overstatement that the source notes Alistair correctly questions later.
But that opening salvo is designed to overwhelm any argument for inaction.
It is, and he immediately sets the rhetorical stakes by declaring a fundamental paradigm shift. He argues that the old model, manual data processing, bespoke analysis taking weeks,
The old way of doing things.
he calls it, and I'm quoting, dead. By labeling the shift as inevitable and the old method as deceased, he's trying to remove compromise from the table right from the start.
Okay, so let's hear from Julian. He says, we're not talking about upgrading software, Alistair. We're discussing the foundational tectonic plates of our industry.
Tectonic plates, strong imagery.
The operational paradigm of the last 20 years, which relied on manual sequential data flow, is gone. It's no longer viable to sell clients a 14-week analytical deep dive when a competitor can deliver 90% of that insight in 4 hours using self-learning systems.
See how he uses paradigm there? He's not saying our process is slow. He's saying the rules of competition have fundamentally changed, and if you follow the old rules, you will lose.
He's establishing the new cold structure of the marketplace first.
Precisely.
And he immediately follows that with the rhetorical weapon we identify.
Obsolescence.
He warns Alistair that clinging to their traditional service model means choosing a slow death. And he explicitly says they will face obsolescence for their entire service line within 5 years.
Let's get his exact words. Julian says, if we maintain our current operational structure, we are actively choosing obsolescence. We will become a historical footnote, a boutique firm that specialized in services the market no longer values.
A historical footnote. Ouch.
And then he brings it home. The decision isn't about profit margin next quarter. It's about avoiding total institutional redundancy. Our biggest competitor is currently designing a system intended to make every human data entry specialist on the planet redundant. If we don't adapt, we become the first casualty of their design.
Yeah, the analysis in the source materials described this move perfectly. It said Julian's use of obsolescence was clinical, inevitable, and terrifying.
It is. It's not a vague threat of losing business. It's a precise, cold statement about permanent redundancy based on these huge structural shifts. It's language designed to force action.
But now, Alistair's response, this is where it gets really interesting. It's described as an advanced rhetorical maneuver.
It is, because he can't just deny the market pressure. That would make him look naive.
Right. So what does he do? He concedes the reality, using our second word, ubiquitous, but then he immediately pivots to challenging its utility, specifically its utility relative to their brand identity.
So he accepts the fact to gain credibility and then reframes the debate around values.
Exactly. Here's Alistair. Julian, I accept that the technology is becoming ubiquitous. You don't have to convince me of the AI's prevalence. I see it penetrating every sector, every regulatory body.
See? He's saying, I'm not an idiot. I see what's happening.
Yes, but then he pivots. But ubiquity does not automatically equal utility, nor does it guarantee quality. Our brand promise is bespoke service and deep, human-driven insight. If we integrate AI blindly and outsource our deep analytical thought processes to a black box, we lose the nuance, which we will discuss later, that defines our high-end value proposition.
Alistair's move is masterful. By accepting that AI is ubiquitous, he avoids wasting time on a pointless debate about its existence.
He sidesteps the trap.
And then he redirects the whole conversation away from existence and toward value judgment. His core concern is that their specific, specialized service model, the thing that makes them, will be flattened by this aggressive automation.
So Julian now has to counter this very valid concern about brand identity. He can't just say, too bad we have to automate. That would be losing the argument.
No, he needs to synthesize their conflicting priorities into a new vision.
And this is where he reframes the entire strategic concept. And he does it by returning to the core idea of the paradigm. He argues that this new structure isn't about replacement, but about augmentation.
A critical distinction.
Here's Julian again. The new paradigm is not about firing human analysts and hiring machines. That's a blunt, simplistic approach that guarantees the loss of bespoke service you fear.
He's acknowledging Alistair's fear directly. Smart.
The new paradigm is this. We use the ubiquitous technology to handle the ubiquitous, mundane, repetitive tasks, the data ingestion, the risk modeling, the first-pass analysis. This frees up our human capital, our high-value experts, to focus 100% on high-level strategy, client relations, and identifying the true outliers in the data.
So what Julian is essentially saying is, we keep the high-end human element that you cherish, Alistair, but we use the machine to eliminate the lower-end tasks that were dragging us toward obsolescence anyway.
Wow. He successfully incorporates Alistair's concern for quality directly into his vision for the new paradigm.
He does.
The entire exchange is just. It's a blueprint for sophisticated debate. Julian forces the shift, using the inevitability of the paradigm and the threat of obsolescence.
And Alistair provides that nuanced caution by acknowledging the ubiquitous reality, but demanding evidence of utility and quality control.
And in the end, they transition from arguing about if they should change to debating how to build a superior model that leverages this new reality.
It really demonstrates that this high-level vocabulary isn't just about using big words to sound smart. It's about using them precisely to structure and ultimately win a strategic argument.
Wow. Okay, that was intense.
It was. High stakes.
Having looked at how the language of strategy can determine external success or failure, let's take that pressure and turn it inward.
A pivot.
A big pivot. We are now moving to the internal world, the complexity of feelings, of realizations, and the language that's necessary for deep personal achievement and self-awareness.
Right, because when we talk about advanced linguistic skill, we have to be able to articulate the texture of our internal reality.
The texture, I like that.
This is where we move from describing market shifts to describing shifts of consciousness.
Okay, so we'll start with the word that represents the ultimate moment of internal clarity. That word is epiphany.
An epiphany, yes. It's defined as a moment of sudden revelation or profound insight. The root is the Greek epiphania, which means manifestation or striking appearance.
A striking appearance. So it's more than just a realization. It implies that the truth was hidden from you and then has suddenly become visible.
Exactly. It's the light bulb turning on moment, sure, but magnified by a factor of 10.
Yeah. It's often associated with these profound life decisions or existential resolutions, or maybe that key breakthrough in a creative project.
The magnitude is key. You know, if you realize you forgot your keys, that's just a realization.
Shackles, right.
If you suddenly understand the core purpose of your entire career trajectory after years of feeling lost, that's an epiphany.
And the source gives that powerful, almost cinematic example. Standing on the mountain, I had an epiphany about what I actually wanted to do with my life.
It feels dramatic because it is dramatic. It's a fundamental shift in perception.
You know, what's interesting is that an epiphany is often the necessary internal event that allows a person or even a company to escape that pull toward obsolescence we were just talking about.
That's a great connection. The insight has to be sudden and profound enough to break the current failing paradigm they're stuck in.
It's the psychological equivalent of the paradigm shift.
It absolutely is. It has to be a foundational restructuring of your personal reality.
Okay, so next, we explore a word that describes a highly sophisticated emotional concept. It requires both empathy and imagination. The word is vicarious.
Vicarious, this is a great one. It means experiencing something in the imagination through the feelings or actions of another person.
Right, and this goes way beyond simple sympathy.
Oh, miles beyond. Sympathy is feeling sorry for someone.
And even empathy, which is understanding what they're feeling.
Right, a vicarious experience involves actually absorbing their experience as if you were participating yourself. It's an act of transfer.
So it demands a high degree of imaginative transfer. The example from the source illustrates this perfectly.
Yeah.
I'm afraid of flying, so I live vicariously through my brother's travel stories.
Yes. The enjoyment, the thrill, the wonder, it's all genuinely felt by the observer, even without the direct physical experience.
And we see this everywhere, right?
Yeah.
In intense sports fandom, for sure.
Absolutely. Or in reading highly engaging historical fiction. Or even in parenting, where the achievements of a child are often experienced as if they were the parent's own accomplishment.
It's the ultimate shared emotional investment. But it really relies on an internal imaginative act to bridge that gap between two people.
It does.
You know, it's also interesting when you look at the darker side of it, the vicarious enjoyment of, say, drama or gossip. We often consume media to experience these high-stakes emotional situations, but without any of the risk of actual involvement.
That's a very sharp point. The word describes the mechanism perfectly, regardless of the emotional valence, positive or negative. It's a precise word for a very complex emotional transfer, not just simple approval or shared happiness.
And finally, we arrive at the word the source material, called the. Get this, the most important word for advanced learners.
I remember this. A big claim.
A huge claim. And it's because it represents the rejection of oversimplification.
Yeah.
The word is nuance.
Yes, and I think the source is right. If you can deploy this word effectively, and more importantly, if you can perceive it accurately, you are demonstrating that you have moved beyond simplistic binary thinking.
Black and white thinking.
Exactly.
So nuance refers to a subtle difference in or a shade of meaning, expression, or sound.
Yeah.
It is the opposite of polarization.
And in an age dominated by sound bites and extremes, the ability to articulate nuance is a political and intellectual superpower. It really is.
Talk about the difference between, say, detail and nuance. They feel similar, but they're not.
They're not. Detail is simply adding more facts to the pile. Nuance is recognizing that those facts fundamentally alter the interpretation of the central argument. It means recognizing that, for example, an argument can be both correct in its facts and harmful in its implementation.
I see. So it's about the subtle interplay of ideas, not just the ideas themselves.
Yes. The ability to articulate nuance is vital in legal interpretation, in foreign policy, and, as we'll see, in artistic critique. If you miss the subtle differences, you miss the truth entirely.
And the example cited really drives this home. The debate was loud, but it lacked nuance because no one was willing to see the complexity of the issue.
The loudness was masking the superficiality of the arguments.
So when you use the word nuance or demand it, you're communicating a respect for complexity, an unwillingness to just accept the easy answer.
And that signals a highly advanced intellectual posture.
Okay, so now let's take these reflective concepts, epiphanies, vicarious, and nuance, and move them into a conversation focused on creative success and self-worth.
Let's do it.
We're at a gallery opening, and we're listening to a conversation between Nora and Elias, who is the successful artist of the night.
And this dialogue, it uses these words to unpack that high-stakes, often paralyzing internal struggle that happens before a creative breakthrough.
Right. So Elias is the celebrated artist, but he's describing the months leading up to this moment of success.
The struggle, not the victory.
Exactly. And Elias admits to Nora that all the external applause, it feels secondary to the immense relief he feels that he didn't compromise his vision. He confesses he was just paralyzed by the fear that his recent work lacked depth.
And he describes his early attempts as feeling, and this is a quote, too blunt, too aggressive. He was worried that his pieces were just shouting at people rather than speaking to them.
So this is his internal realization that his work lacked nuance.
It is. And for an artist, achieving nuance isn't about being complex for the sake of complexity. It's about creating depth and layered meaning that resists a simplistic one-line interpretation.
Let's hear from Elias, he says. I kept looking at the canvas, Nora, and feeling this immense dissatisfaction. It was technically perfect, but it was just loud. It lacked nuance.
Lacked nuance. There it is.
I was trying to force a bold statement, but I was missing the subtle interplay between the colors and the negative space. I realized my fear of failure was making me create art that was black and white, when the truth I was trying to express was entirely in the gray.
And his resolution, the breakthrough that allowed him to finish the centerpiece of the show, it came in the form of a sudden flash of insight.
An epiphany.
A total epiphany.
He recounts this profound moment where he realized he was trying to fit into the paradigm of what modern art was supposed to be. Specifically, he was trying to please the gallery owners and the critics.
So he was adhering to an external, established model rather than following his own raw internal vision.
Yes. Elias says, the moment that everything unlocked was an absolute epiphany. I was standing back, ready to discard the piece entirely, and I suddenly saw it. I wasn't painting for me, I was painting for the critics. I was adhering to the expected paradigm of the gallery circuit. I realized that my own internal truth, however rough, had more value than polished adherence to an external model. When I stopped seeking their approval, the colors finally spoke to each other, creating the subtle distinctions I had been searching for.
That is it's a profound demonstration of the interplay between external structure and internal freedom. He needed a self-directed epiphany to break free of that imposed external paradigm.
His artistic breakthrough was preceded by a rejection of the structural rules of the establishment. It had to be.
And this realization leads him to articulate the nuance of communication itself. He doesn't suggest, throwing the audience out entirely. That would be another kind of bluntness.
Right. Another black and white solution.
Instead, he realizes true success lies in that subtle distinction. You must communicate with the audience, but you have to do it strictly on your own terms. That is the layered distinction that defines authentic artistic success versus just mere commercial appeasement.
And then Nora's response, as the emotionally invested friend, beautifully incorporates our final vocabulary concept.
Vicarious.
Yes. Here's what Nora says. I was just saying to Julian earlier, I feel almost as exhausted and relieved as you look. I watched you struggle with the technical perfection versus the emotional truth for months.
She was in it with him.
And now, seeing you truly shine, seeing the public connect with the authenticity you found during that epiphany, I feel accomplished too. I'm living vicariously through this success, Elias.
See, and she clarifies it.
She does. She says, this isn't just me being happy for you. It's me feeling the payoff of that immense internal pressure through you.
That expression of vicarious joy just elevates the entire scene. It's not just supportive language. It signifies a shared emotional journey.
It highlights the depth of their connection and the sophistication of their communication. They're celebrating the external success, sure, but only as a reflection of that internal struggle and the eventual epiphany that unlocked the work's essential nuance.
And that connects back to our overall goal here today. It's about using precise language to articulate complex reality, whether that reality is external and strategic or internal and emotional.
So we have journeyed across some immense conceptual distances today.
We really have.
We started with the analysis of structural reality, the pervasive nature of the ubiquitous, the unavoidable reality of the paradigm, and the frankly terrifying inevitability of obsolescence in the marketplace.
And from there, we transitioned almost seamlessly to the language of self-discovery. The sudden, fundamental truth of the epiphany, the shared emotional depth of the vicarious experience, and that crucial cognitive requirement of spotting nuance.
And the connecting thread between these high-stakes business strategies and these deep personal reflections is the absolute necessity of precision.
Precision, it all comes back to that.
And that is the core takeaway for you, the learner. Advanced English isn't about using big words to sound sophisticated.
Not at all.
It's about finding the exact word to describe a specific feeling, a specific structural shift, or a specific moment in time. When you use precision, you enhance both clarity and connection.
I mean, just consider the difference. When you use ubiquitous instead of just everywhere, you're being precise about the scale of penetration and normalization.
Right.
When you use the threat of obsolescence instead of losing business, you're being precise about the mechanism of failure. It's structural irrelevance, not just a dip in sales.
And internally, it's the same thing.
Yeah.
When you use vicarious instead of just happy for, you're being precise about the depth of your emotional connection and the imaginative act required to achieve that state.
Exactly. And when you demand nuance in a polarized discussion, you are precisely refusing to engage in shallow black and white thinking.
So we've given you the tools.
The paradigm, the ubiquitous, the obsolescence, the epiphany, the vicarious, and the nuance. These are the tools to operate at that level of high-stakes intellectual discourse.
Where ideas are the currency.
And clarity is paramount.
So let's leave you with this final thought, building directly on the profound connections we've found in the source material between external strategy and internal breakthrough.
Okay. We established that true innovation means constantly running away from obsolescence.
Right, a constant race.
And we also saw that escaping that fate often requires a sudden, unexpected, fundamental insight, a hard-won epiphany.
Which suggests a link then between institutional health and the conditions necessary for that kind of radical clarity.
It does. So if that is true, what institutional structures, whether they're strategic in business or critical in art, inadvertently reward bluntness?
Or reward adherence to the old ways, or reward simplification over the deep, often uncomfortable search for nuance.
Because by creating environments that are hostile to complexity and subtlety, they are actively blocking the very conditions that pursuit of nuance required for breakthrough revelation.
And in doing so, they're sealing their own fate. They're marching toward obsolescence.
So think about where you are sticking to the established paradigm simply because the alternative, the search for true nuance, feels too uncertain, too difficult, or maybe just too slow.
Because that difficult, subtle path is often the only way to avoid becoming irrelevant in the long run. Go out there, find the nuance, and reshape your paradigm.